my name is Mr. Sharath Mahendran, and I am the creator of the YouTube channel Building Beautifully. I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Now, Mrs. Alison Dench, if you could do the same, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Yes, my name is Mrs. Alison Dench. I'm a resident in Western Sydney, and I solemnly and sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Now, I assume both of you have short opening statements to make. I will proceed in the same order. Mr. Mahendran.
Good morning, panel, and thank you so much for offering me the opportunity to speak at your inquiry today. My name is Sharath Mahendran, and I am the creator of the YouTube channel Building Beautifully, a YouTube channel about transport and urban planning in Sydney. Since I started the channel around 2 years ago, my channel has achieved 36,000 subscribers and has amassed over 3.6 million cumulative views, which demonstrates the strong interest and passion in transport and the improvement of transport that Sydneysiders have. But more important than all of this, and the reason I'm here today, is the fact that I am a lifelong resident of Western Sydney, having been born and raised in the Hills District. I've seen firsthand how the lack of adequate transport links and a very car-centric form of urban planning has encouraged for decades car trips far more than public transport. Research by Transport for New South Wales in 2023 shows that only 14% of journeys to work from Western Sydney were made by public transport, compared with over double that, 32% of journeys in Eastern Sydney. This is an incredible and unacceptable deficit. But is that really all that surprising when we consider that only 30 stations are located west of Blacktown? The burden of housing new residents to Sydney largely rests upon areas west of Blacktown, such as Austral, Spring Farm, Marsden Park, and Oran Park. Western Sydney dwellings are expected to grow in number by 41% by the year 2041, without the public transport investments to show for it. Good public transport reduces reliance on motor vehicles, which helps to reduce global warming. Furthermore, and we've already heard about this today, public transport is 4 times cheaper than driving, according to Transport for New South Wales, which is a very relevant stat given the current cost of living crisis. Public transport is also believed to result in an additional 8 to 33 minutes of walking each day, according to a New South Wales health study, representing improved health outcomes for its users. So although automated vehicles are, they obviously have all their benefits in terms of they can be more reliable than public transport. Public transport has the benefits that I have just said. They're cheaper and represent better health benefits. Now, in the last inquiry, the Metro West came up quite a bit, and since that time I applaud Labor for committing to building a Metro West station at Rose Hill in December, which will pend successful investigations. Sydney needs more strong public transport decisions like this. The government must commit to funding business case studies for various metro extensions. By extending the Sydney Metro Southwest to Liverpool and perhaps beyond, the Sydney Metro Northwest to Schofields and then St Mary's, the Southwest Rail Link to the new Western Sydney Airport, the Sydney Metro West to the new Western Sydney Airport and Aerotropolis, and the Sydney Metro Western Sydney Airport to Macarthur, a substantially more connected Western Sydney will be created. I also strongly urge the construction of a north-south metro that passes through Parramatta, ideally from Norwest to Kogarah, linking most train lines to improve Sydney's inter-suburban and inter-regional travel, and help improve access to Parramatta, which is meant to be Sydney's second CBD. Crucially, these public transport links cannot be built without good housing. For too long, the link between housing and transport has been unlinked in this city. The state government invests billions in new metros and in public transport, and yet largely leaves it to local councils to decide what gets built around stations. As a result, too many Sydneysiders have no choice but to live on the outskirts of our city, far away from new public transport. I urge this inquiry to help change this. Why are thousands of homes being built in, say, North Kellyville, when still not one building has been built right next to Kellyville Metro Station? And that's just one example. A recent KPMG study found that 49% of dwellings added in Sydney during the past 15 years were located within 1 kilometre of a train station. We should try and push that up to as close to 100% as we can. Build more density around train stations such as Glenfield, Blacktown and Penrith. New metro stations such as St Mary's and Rosehill should have density planned in tandem with their construction in order to ensure taxpayers are getting as much bang for their buck as possible. I will state, however, that far more of the burden of housing should be placed on eastern Sydney, which has a majority of Sydney's trains and upcoming metro stations. Now, to finish up, bus routes in Western Sydney often run at woeful frequencies. Take route 748, which is a crucial route linking West Marsden Park to Schofields and Tullawong stations. This route runs every 15 minutes on peak, but only every 30 minutes off peak. That's an average wait time of 15 minutes for residents, and that's reflected across Sydney. You shouldn't need to drive to your local station to get to the city or wherever you need to go, because car parks inevitably fill up quickly. They have finite space and they will never be able to accommodate every single car in a suburb of thousands. Western Sydney desperately needs better feeder buses to its train stations, running no less than every 15 minutes all day, and I would urge the government to invest in this. Buses, however, are not the solution to public transport needs of Western Sydney. They are merely a short-term fix that must be followed with rail investment. I thank the inquiry again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, and I strongly hope that what I have said can help inform and shape the public transport of Western Sydney for years to come.
Thank you, Mr Mahendran. Mrs Dench.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to start by acknowledging we're meeting on Darug Nation's land, so thank you. I'd like to also thank the Portfolio Number 6 Committee for the inquiry. This is such an essential importance issue. As a dedicated and concerned resident of Western Sydney, I'm here today to advocate for the rights and wellbeing of those in our community who are experiencing disadvantage and often do not have a voice. With a human-centred focus and a deep desire to nurture the capacity and capability of our local communities, I firmly believe that the cornerstone of a just and civil society lies in the fabric of our everyday lives. Embracing the philosophy espoused by Eva Cox, I firmly believe that a just and truly civil society is built upon a foundation of social connections, with public transport serving as a vital link between public and private spheres. The current reality for many residents of Western Sydney is marred by inequities that permeates their daily existence. As Gough Whitlam astutely observed in 1972, a person's standard of living is increasingly determined by their geographical location, highlighting the profound impact of transportation access on socioeconomic outcomes. Access to safe and reliable public transport is not only a matter of convenience, but it's also a crucial determinant of overall health and wellbeing. It's a right as a citizen. However, barriers such as geographical distance, transportation costs, language barriers, cultural differences and discriminatory practices effectively bar individuals from accessing necessary transport services and care. Regrettably, these issues persist, despite being consistently highlighted in the top 5 concerns during the local government's community strategic planning processes across local government areas of the Western Sydney. The voices of our residents continue to be disregarded, resulting in the inequitable distribution of public transport, infrastructure and associated services throughout the landscape of Western Sydney. The disparities in public transport infrastructure across Western Sydney are glaring, with many residents facing inadequate access to bus stops and infrequent service intervals. Moreover, the existing transport options disproportionately favour affluent areas, exacerbating the socio-economic divide within the region. A significant proportion of Western Sydney's residents find themselves locked into car dependency and forced car ownership, leading to significant financial burdens and environmental consequences. The lack of viable alternative transport options not only strains household budgets, but also contributes to longer commute times and limited access to essential services. The projected population for Western Sydney for 2041 is staggering. Yet new growth areas are being developed with little consideration for adequate access to public transport. Instead, the focus remains on car-dependent communities, neglecting the pressing need for alternative transport options. Rapid urbanisation outpaces the development of public transport infrastructure, leaving new communities and suburbs left bereft of adequate transport options. As a result, residents face prolonged commute times and limited access to essential services, particularly in growth areas on the western fringe of Sydney. Despite these challenges, infrastructure expenditure remains disproportionately skewed towards motorways and roads, neglecting crucial investments in heavy and light rail, footpaths, shared pathways, cycleways. And the corridors, the public corridors, are skewed mainly towards cars. Those public spaces need to be more equitably used, particularly in relation to cycles and other alternative forms of travel. Furthermore, the benefits of smaller public transport projects in transport disadvantaged urban fringe suburbs cannot be overstated. These initiatives yield tangible socio-economic benefits, including lower crime rates, increased employment, improved health outcomes, and enhanced social inclusion. It is imperative that such benefits are factored into cost-benefit analysis of public transport projects. It's more than just making a buck. We need to look at the social outcomes of our community to be a truly civil society. Spatial inequity mapping highlights stark contrasts in access to jobs, educations and services across Sydney, underscoring the profound impact of geographical location on individuals' quality of life. Addressing these disparities requires concerted efforts from all levels of government, as well as meaningful engagement with private corporations to ensure equitable access to essential services like public transport. In conclusion, I again express my sincere gratitude to the committee for undertaking this critical inquiry into the current and future public transport needs of Western Sydney. By investing in equity-based transport options and fostering collaboration across sectors, we can work towards creating a truly civil society where everyone has equal access to essential services and opportunities for socio-economic advancement. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you both for your very excellent detailed submissions as well. And of course, we have read them in detail and they're very excellent. I wanted to just do a quick kind of high-level political question at this point. We've heard the Premier, especially recently, maybe in the last 6 months particularly, stress the need to build up, not out, indicating that he does want to see, and we've seen potential rezoning efforts now underway. However, the out hasn't stopped. The phrase is being used that that's the reason for the infill, but are there any examples, or are you aware of anywhere that has stopped in terms of those southwest growth centres? And if you could also comment just how inequitable the transport situation is for the new, Wilton and Appin, that I understand doesn't have any. I'll go to you first, Mrs. Dench, and then you, Mr. Mahendran.
Not a problem.
Look, nothing's stopped. If anything, it's ramped up. It's just unbelievable the amount of growth and infrastructure build that's happening without any view or thought around public transport and how we're going to get around. It's going to continue. It's not going to stop. It'd be great if we could build up instead of out, but the horse is bolted. It's happening. It really and truly is happening. The inequities and the disparities around accessing public transport is just going to be exacerbated more and more because of this. What needs to happen is more view about interconnections within Western Sydney and looking at building up those centres within Western Sydney for people to be able to access those services rather than having to do miles and miles of trips into major centres like Westmead Hospital, Liverpool Hospital, even into Sydney. And jobs. We have communities out our way that are very focused. Their roles and jobs are on those service industries. They can't work from home. They have to get about and get to. They provide themselves essential services, which are often very difficult to get to. You can travel 2 hours just to get 50 k's. It's crazy. It took me an hour and a half just to travel from Teresa Park to Parramatta this morning. It's going to get more and more congested, and putting rapid buses on the roads is only going to increase to that unless we put in some significant infrastructure to allow for those buses to get through quicker.
Thank you, Ms. Mahendran.
Yes, thank you for asking me that question. So, Yeah, no, so pretty much mirroring what Mrs. Dench has just said, I don't believe that that we are really stopping the out. It does seem like the out is still continuing in places like Oran Park, Marsden Park and Bingara Gorge. There'll sadly always be a market for building out, but that's primarily because we're not building up enough. Now, I personally believe more of the burden of building up should be placed on Eastern Sydney because, after all, much of our massive public transport investments are being focused there. Look at the Sydney Metro City and South West, that is primarily sitting east of Parramatta. Look at the Sydney Metro West. While it will definitely benefit Western Sydney, much of it is being built in Eastern Sydney regardless. However, we aren't really stopping the building out. So I would recommend that we try our best to slow the building out because there are so many impacts negative impacts of car-dependent sprawl. We're talking about the urban heat effect, which has already been mentioned today. It costs something like, I'm not going to quote the exact figure, but it costs a lot more to build a house on greenfield land as opposed to infill housing, which represents a massive tax on the government. So I would recommend it slows, but these places are already there. Oran Park's already there. Marsden Park is already there. There are already people living there, and that is why I return to what I said in my opening statement, where I reaffirm that we must continue to build and extend our metros. Labor has not committed to that yet, and I understand that money isn't infinite, but eventually we do need to extend the Tallawong Metro to Schofields and to St Mary's. Every day on my, maybe not every day, but many times a month on my YouTube channel, I hear people asking why have they not extended the metro from Tallawong to Schofields and beyond. That is a massive gap in the metro network which would really help people up in Marsden Park. Why don't they extend the Western Sydney Airport Metro south towards Oran Park and Macarthur? That would help people in Oran Park get around easier and actually get towards the city much faster. So urban sprawl is not ideal. We need to stop blocking infill housing, but much of this urban sprawl is already there, so we need to be building the metros and the public transport links to accommodate for it.
Thank you. And it's your understanding that, as you said, with Oran Park, Marsden Park, others, so that they have been built without that transport infrastructure being placed first, and now as they stand, are there frequent bus services if there's no rail or metro obviously going to those places? Ms Mahendran, are there frequent bus services, do you know?
I'm not aware of Oran Park, but I know that Marsden Park, while they seem to get a train, I mentioned it in my submission, while they seem to get a bus roughly every 15 minutes in the peak, that goes down to only every half an hour towards Schofields and to Tallawong. And I personally don't believe that is frequent enough, because a half an hour service represents an average of a 15-minute wait, and I believe not many people are willing to risk a 15-minute average wait. Like, imagine you miss that bus, you're going to have to wait another half an hour. In reality, most of us here in practice, if we have a half-hourly bus, we're probably just going to want to drive to Tallawong or to Rouse Hill and just park our car there, and that I've already mentioned how expensive owning a car is. Imagine needing to own a car, spend it's something like 10 grand a year on owning a car just because your local bus is only running every half an hour to your local metro station.
Just one last question with in terms of your submission, Mr Mahendran, you say that when part 2, I don't think there's a page number, but conduct investigations to identify more rail corridors, and you suggest that what you've suggested above, very detailed. Thank you so much for your extensive work and knowledge. You're all studying or have completed civil engineering, is it?
Still studying.
Still studying. Yes. Thank you. But you do say that these are merely proposals that the government has already made. What do you mean by that?
For part 1, you mean?
Part 2, conduct investigations, but you reference the part 1.
Yeah, yes. For part 1, yes.
So
part
the
1,
government's already investigated all of those?
So no, they're purely proposals. So you may or may not remember that the Liberal government, in the lead up to the New South Wales state election in 2023, they said that they would fund business case studies for an extension, for all the extensions that are on, I believe it's page 3. Labor only committed to Tallawong to St Mary's and Erytropolis to Macarthur, and I'm yet to hear anything from the Labor government indicating they're actually going to commit to those. But all of these have been proposed. There's no business case studies to back them up.
Okay.
So business case studies take years. So at earliest, these metro lines wouldn't be able to be open for the next 15 years, and that's if we start today. That's if we started a business case study today. So, yeah.
Thank you. So, actually, no, I'm conscious of time. We've got 9 minutes left. Mr. Diano.
Hi. So, thank you both for your submissions. There's a slight sort of tension, I think, in the two submissions. One is, I think, Ms. Dench, you're advocating that there's probably more bang for the buck if we invest in an extensive bus network, whereas Mr. Mahendran, you're more focused on the sort of big ticket major rail infrastructure projects. I mean, obviously government has to choose. Perhaps you might make a comment about the, you know, that tension in terms of the two kind of, I would argue,
Maybe Mrs. Dench, firstly, in terms of, is that the right summary of the submission?
Contradictory positions.
I'm highlighting the fact that buses is the only solution that's been looked at the moment and the issues there. I would rather see light rail. I would rather see those permanent connections and corridors built so as people can get around and they're more permanent. Buses can be stopped tomorrow and lost tomorrow. So if we're looking at rapid bus, which is, we've just heard, a business case is going to take years, they're the band-aid solution in the interim. So let's do that well. Let's try and do it as best as we can until we can get more permanent in. So I don't think it's a tension of one or the other. We need to look at a multiple way in which to address the need in the here and the now and the future needs that are coming.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that sentiment. I don't think it's really buses versus metro. I personally strongly believe that metros do need to be built, but at the end of the day, metros, as I've just said, it would probably, my best estimate would be, if we started today, it wouldn't be 15 years until many of these metros were built. So in the interim, we need better buses. We need buses that are running much more frequently. We shouldn't have a bus every half an hour to your local train station. When that train station, Tallawong Metro has a train to the city every 10 minutes. That's a brilliant frequency. That's an average of only every 5 minutes. But if you live in Marsden Park, you need to wait, during the day, you need to wait half an hour to get to that metro station. You're not benefiting from that very frequent service because your bus isn't good enough. So I would say, yes, we absolutely need the metro investment, but in the meantime, we definitely need the bus investment too. So it's not one or the other, I think it's both.
They both obviously cost money, you know, and there's a limited budget in terms of the priorities of government.
I hear what you're saying there about the cost and the cost factor and what should come first and how do we spend our resources. It's how we actually determine what is cost effective or not cost effective, and if we don't incorporate the social factors and the implications, it's going to cost us a lot more in the long term with crime rates, social isolation, mental health issues, that we're going to have to fork out resources in other areas such as health, education to address. So we really need to be doing some really strong cost-benefit analysis that includes the social impacts and implications for us to see what's of more benefit and where's the best bang for buck going to be.
Mr. Mahendran, do you have something to say about that as well in terms of cost effectiveness?
I think I've said what I can say about that, yes.
Can I ask Mr. Mahendran, you list a number of projects, which one do you think should be the top of the priority list?
That's a good question. Well, I personally believe one of the, they're all very important. I think one of the most essential ones, which is somewhat low-hanging fruit and I think would be most budget-friendly, would be Tallawong to St Mary's. I know that many people who live in the hills, myself included, really despise the 3-kilometre gap in a new metro between Tallawong and the T1. So you can't get from Tallawong to Schofields easily. So people from Blacktown who work at Macquarie, for example, or people even from the Richmond area, from the Schofields area who work at Macquarie, who work at Chatswood, they don't get to benefit from this metro that runs every 10 minutes to those areas. So I personally believe that should probably be the priority, I would say.
Ms. Merton, do you have?
Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Dench, if I could put a similar question to yourself, just in terms of you citing your public your trip from Teresa Park to here and the time on that. I'm just thinking, what do you think the priorities are in terms of public transport for the southwest?
For the southwest itself, I think it's a more you need a multi-layer approach. It's not bus, it's not rail. It needs to be things like on-demand services to help people who truly need assistance and don't have opportunities and ways to get around. It's things like car sharing, carpooling, looking at those other sorts of initiatives, looking at how we can fund social enterprises to help to who have their focus is a social outcome, not just a making a money outcome. It's about what those social outcomes are, to provide some different types of transport needs and solutions. That comes with listening to people and understanding and hearing what people say will address their needs and how they can get around. So it's, look, it is going to be years and years before there's a rail line from Teresa Park over here to Parramatta. It is a known thing. I'm going to have to use a car. My next generation and possibly the generation after that are going to have to use cars until things are in place, which is going to have such big impacts if that sprawl keeps heading out our way on our future generations. So we need to be looking at multiple ways in which we can provide solutions. It's not a single silver bullet answer. It's a multifaceted way on how we're going to approach this, and it comes from collaborating, talking, listening and understanding people's needs and hearing what they see as a solution as well for their area. Place-based solutions are going to be a big part of our way forward to help people.
Thank you.
How much of a difference does, pretty much every witness really has stressed the need for connectivity between north, western Sydney, broadly the hills, as well as southwestern Sydney, and talking about the north-south rail link, as well as then connections with the airport metro. How much of a difference would connecting that north and south by rail, metro, or say rail and metro, how much of a difference would that make to Western Sydney residents? Has there been research or work on that, or even just from your own kind of anecdotal evidence and your own experience? Mrs. Dench, firstly?
Yes, look, it would make a major difference and a major impact for people being able to connect and get around within southwest Sydney. The whole idea, you've got that spine going up from north-south, it can then tentacles and integrate people moving within. Not everybody in southwest Sydney travels to Sydney. Not everybody goes there every day. We travel within, we work within and around, and we don't have those networks or those connections like eastern Sydney has. So it's about, we build that spine and other things will come as a result of that. It's critical.
Thank you.
Look, Sydney's been designed to funnel people into eastern Sydney. It's all about getting you to eastern Sydney. Every train line goes into central, into the city circle. That's not how a good public transport network should work. A public transport network should also allow for circumferential travel. If we as a state are serious about making Parramatta Sydney's second CBD, we need to make sure we have better north-south links to that city centre. And as Mrs. Dench has mentioned, not everyone in Sydney is trying to get to Sydney as it is. Many people work within Western Sydney, work in places like Liverpool, Blacktown, Parramatta. My girlfriend is currently doing a placement at Liverpool Hospital and lives on the other side of Sydney. It would take her 2 hours to commute to Liverpool from the other side. It would take her much shorter to get into Sydney CBD. These are the type of people, these are the real people who need better links need better links within Western Sydney in order to get to their jobs and their occupations. Because at the end of the day, not everyone works in Sydney CBD, and we shouldn't even have a public transport network that relies on where people work. It should be where you go to school. It should be where you want to go out for entertainment, for dining. It should be all sorts of things should be accommodated for to reduce car dependency for all the reasons that I discussed in my opening statement.
Thank you.
Can I ask just question? On that question? I mean, we heard evidence, I think, at our last hearing around the effective dismantling of one of the north-south links, which is the link that exists between Parramatta and Bankstown as a result of the conversion. I wonder if you might offer some comment about that.
Parramatta and Bankstown.
Yes, so there's an existing, standard rail link that takes you from Parramatta that can get you to Bankstown via Auburn.
No, I don't think that train. So that train line, I think it used to exist, but that hasn't existed for years. That would be a brilliant. The
line is still there. The line is still there.
No, the line is still there. There's no service that takes you straight from Parramatta to Bankstown, and that would be. And the metro in its current form nothing about it would eliminate the possibility of a train service from Parramatta to Bankstown, because the section of line north of Bankstown, Birrong and Barala and all of that, that's still going to be heavy rail. So actually that would be a brilliant idea, to have a service that did that. Instead of just shuttling people between Bankstown and Lidcombe, maybe have it go to Parramatta instead.
Can I ask just one more question?
We are into wanting to just quickly.
Just very quickly. Sorry, you mentioned about the lack of development around Kellyville Station. What's your understanding around why that hasn't actually happened?
Truthfully, I'm not entirely sure. I look at the website quite often, and there's these beautiful pictures of what they plan for it to look like. Chris Minns has just announced that Kellyville will be one of the priority precincts, but the reality is Kellyville Metro, since 2019, there's still nothing there. It's the same at Bella Vista, it's the same at Cherrybrook, and as someone who lives in the hills, I would be more than happy to see some density built there, because instead we're having people living on the outskirts of Marsden Park and Oran Park, and there will always be a market for detached houses like that, but there will also be a market for living next to a metro station with services every 4 minutes in peak and every 10 minutes off peak. So I don't see why we should deny people that.
Well, it's probably developers can see that they can make money pretty easily in certain fringe urban areas. Mrs. Dench, do you think that's part of this?
I concur. Definitely it is part of that.
Thank you. On that note, we'll have a break now. Thank you so much again for your detailed submissions and your extensive passion and work in this area. Really appreciate you giving evidence. The committee will now break until 11:15.